Hi there, and welcome to So Glad You Asked. Okay, today we're taking on the question, what is homeschooling? What does it look like? So glad you asked. Okay, so first of all, let me just say right off the bat, my intent here is to just share with you my experiences, to give you my 2 cents, my take on the subject, and is in no way meant to be prescriptive as far as to tell you what you should do with your family or what choices you should make based on the choices that we've made, but simply just to offer you encouragement. And maybe there are some places that my thoughts, my comments, my opinions, my perceptions could impact your concept of something. I don't know. But I know personally speaking, whenever I'm considering new materials to use for my homeschool, one of the first things we'll do is I will look in and see what other people thought. What did other people experience? What were the pros? What were the cons? What worked? What didn't? And then I will use that information to try to decide, can I apply that to my own situation, my own circumstance? And then go from there. So basically, that's what I'm hoping to do here. And right now, I'm taking on the topic of what is homeschooling. So glad you asked. Okay, so some of you out there right now, it is currently March of 2020, and we are in the throes of all the cancellations and closures due to the coronavirus. So some of you are possibly watching this video as a way to try to get your head around how you're going to do this new homeschooling scenario where your public school has closed and now, oh, congratulations, you're a homeschooler. Now, I think there are some systems out there, some public systems that are moving their classroom and their instructions online. So that's not really homeschooling. That's more of like distance learning, like if you were in college, but you used a computer to connect to your professor and to your fellow students, because the materials are already decided, the topics are already decided, the standards, the goals of what you're going to learn during that session are already decided and laid out for you. And all you have to do is just participate and do whatever is assigned and that kind of stuff. Okay, that's distance learning. That's not really homeschooling. But I also want to say that those of you who do take on making those decisions and coming up with those ideas and plans and actively leading your children's education, it's important to keep in mind, at least in this season with the coronavirus and the social distancing and all that stuff, this ain't homeschooling either, okay? I've seen plenty of people on social media talking about the, yay, now we're all homeschoolers, or also throwing in that same idea too of, the homeschoolers are also getting their styles cramped a little bit by the shutdowns too. And that is true. And I just want to highlight that because some of you at the end of this season are going to look back and say, oh my word, homeschooling was terrible. This ain't homeschooling, okay? There are lots of things that we do in a week, typically, that we're not doing right now. We are spending much more time at home than we ever have as homeschoolers, okay? We're not seeing our friends. We're not going to the library. We're not doing field trips. That's one of the things that we really like about homeschooling is we go on field trips while you guys are at school and work. So those are the things that are not happening right now. There's also a lot of clubs and groups and activities for homeschoolers. And I am actually going to talk about that in just a few minutes, okay? Because I want either you, the family who has been thrown into this thing called homeschooling by mere circumstance, but I'm also talking to those of you who are maybe watching this video because you're curious about homeschooling and you want to know what it looks like and you want to know, sort of a taste of what to expect. Maybe you're just starting out. Maybe you're still in the process of making the decision. So glad you asked. I'm going to tell you my thoughts on that. Okay, so one of the first things that I think is important conceptually to think about with homeschooling is we are home educating, okay? My husband supports, but he doesn't necessarily direct. I am directing the course of my children's education. I am making choices for them. on what I want them to learn, what I think is important for them to learn. I'm working on the things that I see in them as individuals, the bents that they may have towards, different types of learning and possibly future careers. So I am not doing school at home. I think this is one of the things that some people mistakenly move in this direction at the beginning of their homeschooling journey. I did. Okay. I was a publicly educated student, and when I decided to homeschool, one of the first things I thought was, I need to make my house like a school. You don't. You don't. Some people do, and they like it that way. It gives them, an element of relief, or lowers their anxiety, or helps them to conduct their home education in that way. But you don't have to, okay? You don't have to have a schoolroom. You don't have to work from 8 to 2 every day. You don't have to have your kid constantly sitting at the table with paper and pencil in hand. Whatever it is that you recall that happens in a classroom, a brick and mortar classroom with a teacher, maybe an assistant, and somewhere between 10 and 30 kids. Your homeschool does not have to look like that. It can look whatever you want it to look like, okay? Now, I mentioned the whole 8 to 2. Let me talk about that for a second. My 8th grade student, I currently have an 8th grade, a 7th grade, a 3rd grade, and a 1st grade. My 8th grade student spends about 6 or 7 hours of her work day, okay? But she doesn't spend that entire time with nose in the books. She'll do a little bit of work, and then she'll leave and work on some chores. She'll do a little bit of work, and then she'll go and work on a video for YouTube. She'll do a little bit of work, and then she'll go practice singing. So during that time, she has her own educational and personal goals that she's focusing on, okay? And the reason I say that especially is because then if you take a look at my 1st grade student, she spends about an hour to an hour and a half per day. Really, we do the math work, she goes and plays. She comes back a little bit later, we do some reading, and she goes and plays. A little bit later, we'll do some handwriting and start learning some cursive, So basically, we also do another thing called CC, so we're working on other focuses of learning. But my point is, it doesn't take her very long. And if I wanted to make her 1st grade experience look like the brick and mortar schools, she would be at it all day long. Okay, that probably wouldn't go very well for us. So if you are just starting out, or if you're suddenly homeschooling someone in those early grades, don't get so caught up in how many hours per day that you need to be investing in teaching them, okay? All right. Let's see here. While we're talking about the whole, individual children, let me also mention that I don't expect my kids to learn all the same, okay? So I'm not expecting my every student at this age or grade level, which is often what we use as the benchmark, to know exactly this material. What I do is I've explained to my kids, we're going to work every day. Every day that we are using on our education and on learning, we're going to work and we're going to learn. And there are going to be times when we start learning slow because it's a hard concept, or you're not getting it, or I'm not doing a good job explaining it, and we have to try to rework some different ideas. But there's also going to be days where, you know what, you got this. Let's move on. We don't need to spend any more time on it. But I am not measuring them by some average student expectations. And the reason that I want to say that too is because I know I've heard that some of you who are working on the sudden homeschooler side are like, oh no, my kid was already behind and now it's going to be so much worse because we've got this extended, summer break in theory, and, concerned then about how much farther behind they're going to be. And I just really want to encourage you, if that is your worry, if that is your concern, to just try to think about it like this. Some of my girlfriends, some of my mom friends have just a knack for keeping their houses tidy and clean. Some of my friends are really good cooks. Like, I want them at my potluck every time. Some of my friends are really good at managing multiple kids' schedules that are, nearly every night of the week. And they do it well, and they do it with a good attitude. Okay? Those are not my strong suits. Those are just not my strong suits. So, if my friends were to then start to think that I had to meet those same expectations that they have, or that, to perform at the standard that they perform at, I would fail miserably. So, I have other things that I'm good at, and maybe if you ask, I can answer, oh, so glad you asked. But now I'm just going to use that as an example to say that, I would be a total failure as a mom and as a parent if those were the standards that I was measuring my success at. And so then I don't expect my children to all measure at the same standard at the same age. So the last thing that I want to sort of help you out with is resources, okay? There are tons of materials out there for homeschoolers, okay? There's everything from the big, fancy, expensive, buy it, open it, use it, plug and play, box set curricula, okay? There's the individual pieces so that you can sort of just, cafeteria plan your way towards the different subjects and what you want them to learn or how you want them to learn. And you also have a lot of free, online, cheap, borrow from the library kind of materials too. There's been a lot of materials that we've used over the year that were just in our local library. So that is one of the things that I think can be very overwhelming in the early days of homeschooling, is just figuring out what to use. There's so much stuff out there. And again, that's one of my goals for doing this channel, is so that I can give you some feedback of what's worked, what didn't, what I liked, what I hated, what I dumped in the garbage without a second thought because it was horrible. Hopefully I won't get any legal trouble for that. But there's a lot of material out there, and so I just want to encourage you to think about your priorities in that regard. Do you want to spend a lot of money? Do you not? Do you want one program that's going to be very parent involved, or do you not? Do you like workbooks, or do your kids, or do they not? So those are the types of things that you have to think about. Another very small part of that is called the different educational philosophies. Okay, I know for a while, the Montessori schools were all the rage, and that was basically a educational philosophy model that was being applied in those specific classrooms and schools. I think it was mostly a preschool focus was the Montessori schools. But anyway, there are tons of different educational philosophies. My family, we lean towards the classical educational model. We pretty much have for the entire time that we've been homeschooling, about 8 years now. But we've also thrown in some Charlotte Mason. There are homeschooling families out there who do unschooling or eclectic schooling. There's just a whole array of different educational philosophies. And at some point in the earlier days, I encourage you to discover which model that fits best with your family, because it will help you to avoid investing in materials that don't fit with your educational goals. But that's something that I know when I've talked to people who've thought about homeschooling, we're completely like, oh my gosh, that's a whole nother level. But it is helpful. It is helpful if you've made the decision to homeschool and you're trying to figure out now the materials. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is the activities. Oh my goodness, if I had $1 for, if I had a quarter for every time the whole what about socialization topic comes up in conversation with people who don't understand homeschooling. And here's the thing. First of all, the my students are interacting with people of all ages and all backgrounds in a typical day, assuming that it's a day that we're out and about. Okay, they're interacting with all ages, all peoples, all walks of life, generally speaking. And it's really interesting because they are literally socializing with an array of people. Okay. In addition to that, they also participate in activities. My younger two, not so much these days because we just haven't quite found where they want to plug in. They have experienced a little bit with soccer, and that's just something that's an extracurricular opportunity that's available to all students in the area. It's not exclusively homeschoolers, but if you can find a group of homeschoolers or a network of homeschoolers, sometimes there are memberships that you participate in to like buy into this awareness of what's going on locally. You really could set yourself up in a situation to where you have to work hard to find time to do your lessons and your studies, because there are so many activities where we live available to us that we could probably be out of the house all day, every day. Okay? And many of them are during the day and geared towards homeschoolers. There's homeschool band, homeschool basketball, homeschool gym, homeschool swimming, homeschool drama, homeschool dance, homeschool taekwondo, homeschool Lego groups, homeschool robotics groups, homeschool anime clubs. I mean, there's a lot out there available. And so if you are a homeschooler and your children are not getting socialization time, it is not because of lack of opportunities. Now, I say that, but really, I don't know where you are, where you live. Maybe homeschooling is just not very popular where you live, and so, there's not really in your immediate area. Here's what I suggest. Go onto Facebook, do a search of your town, your city, and homeschoolers, okay? Let's say you live in a town called Bergsville town, because something Berg, something Ville, something town, popular city endings. Okay, so anyway, you live in Bergsville town. Go on Facebook and search Bergsville Town Homeschoolers. And if that doesn't pop up, try the next city over and just see what you can find. And usually once you can get connected there, then all the other pieces are going to fall into place. You'll start hearing about the art clubs or the art classes, the sign language class, the Spanish class, all those different sort of elective type classes and opportunities and clubs and groups and sports, all that stuff. It's there. It is there where I live, at least. And so I'm just putting that out there too, just because I know a lot of people, if they don't know someone personally who's homeschooling, may have this idea of, we're home Monday through Friday. We never leave our house. We never see other people. We're isolated. And, maybe that's what you want it to look like. If that's the case, okay, that's your option. But if that's your concern, I hope to alleviate that worry by telling you that there's lots of activities, in various places, and it's just a matter of finding them. Sometimes you might have to drive a little further. That's our experience sometimes, but they're there for the taking for those who are interested. Okay, so 2 last pieces of advice for you, the new or sudden or considering homeschooler. Okay, first is, homeschooling is a commitment. Yes, of course. I made the commitment, I made the choice, and I had to move in that direction and do the things I needed to do. However, you're never stuck with it. It's not a lifelong commitment, okay? It is perfectly fine for you to make the decision semester by semester, okay? For example, it's the beginning of the school year, and you're like, well, I've thought about homeschooling. I don't know. It just seems like such a big change. Sure. But you know what? Just do it. Just do it. Follow your state regulations, whatever they are, as far as the notices or filings or whatever you need to do to be in compliance with your state laws for homeschooling. Homeschool your child. You know what? If by Christmas, if it's a total disaster, you send them to school. Or vice versa. You send them to school and you're just not feeling the peace about that decision, You do whatever that state law is as far as withdrawing them, and you homeschool for the rest of the year. And then you make the decision again come fall. Okay? Now, our hope is that we will homeschool all the way through. But if I had to think about that right now, it would be a big fat no. So I just have to take each year at a time, and that's what I do. Which leads me to my second piece of advice. Don't ever quit on your worst day. Now, that applies to anything. A new diet, a new exercise plan, a new job, a new business, homeschooling. Don't quit on your worst day. And we have some worst days. There are days when I see that yellow bus drive by my house and I just want to run down my driveway and flag them down and send my kids off to school on those days. It happens. Yeah, some days are not great. And, you know, some people will say, oh, I don't have the patience for homeschooling. Honey, I don't either. I do not. Patience, again, not my strong suit, but we make it work. And I would like to think that ultimately my kids are benefiting from me as their instructor. So anyway, be encouraged. And as far as the rest of these videos are concerned, post a comment. Let me know if there's another topic that you would like for me to share my opinions on. I am happy to share my opinions. And also, I don't know if I mentioned, I am also looking at possibly doing some videos on the teaching English online to foreign students. I've had experience with 4 different companies now. So I think at some point I will also do videos to share the pros and cons of each of those from my perspective. So if you like this video, give me a like, subscribe, and let me know what you want to hear more about. And, you know, hang in there. You're doing great. Catch you next time.